Ian,
Chris.
we are back at it again. Checking out some Shudder exclusives. I actually found out some information about this Shudder deal.
Okay, yeah.
Apparently,
Did we get a sponsorship?
no.
Oh, okay.
No one has. Somebody would have to watch this. No. So Shudder gets exclusive rights to some of these movies. However, that dictates whether it's an exclusive or an original.
Of course.
But Shudder Canada is a completely different animal, and that's why this movie doesn't
Is it
appear.
a tiger?
It is, in fact, a tiger. Thank you for ruining all that information I was trying to get out. No, I don't. I got nothing. It didn't come out in Shudder Canada, so it's not an original. It's an exclusive for the United States Shudder.
Okay.
But we're checked out.
Random Acts of Violence.
Random Acts of Violence. I don't know why I remember that because it's an Anthrax song.
From the star of Matthew Blackheart Monster Smasher.
Jay Baruchel.
Who our podcast crew covered that movie in November 2018. Go check out the podcast.
Yeah, this is actually directed by him.
Yep.
Starring him. Edited by him, which was surprising to see. But it is a slasher movie.
He's got a little bit of experience with directing and all that.
Yeah.
All that jazz. He is the writer of, most notably, Goon, and the writer and director of Goon 2,
Revenge of the Goon.
the Enforcers.
Revenge of the Goons.
Yes.
Those are hockey movies.
Yes. And this movie was almost as violent as Goon.
Really? That's funny. I was actually surprised when you said we should watch this.
What's that?
Because it's a slasher and you hate slashers.
Yeah, but I like the comic book angle on this one. I do like Jay Baruchel. Don't love all of his writing, but I generally like him as an actor.
Yeah.
And I do really like the Goon movies, other than the Jay Baruchel character.
He's more of a comedic guy, usually.
Yeah. But he's definitely has a hand in horror stuff, too. A little bit here, a little bit there.
Okay. So, what is amongst the terror? What the hell's this shit called? Against the evil. Violence is never the option. What the hell's it
Revenge
called?
of the Violence.
What's it called?
Random Acts of Violence.
Random Acts of Senseless Violence. That's the Anthrax song, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's it about?
So it is about a comic book writer. I think he's a writer and the drawer. He does it all, apparently. He's the only one.
That's what comic book people do. They do everything.
It's not
think that's
overly
usually how that
typical.
works.
No,
I don't
not
think
usually.
that- I think
it does happen.
Yeah, I mean, let's...
Yeah, he wouldn't be the first person to invent
No.
writing and drawing.
No.
But yeah, he does this.
He's not Jesus.
He does the biggest horror comic around
Yes.
about a serial killer, based on a true story, but within the universe. I don't know if it's an actual true story.
Yeah. Wait,
We might be Inception levels of based on a true story.
I didn't look up the I-90
about an
killer.
actual killer.
Yeah.
So, he gets criticism for glorifying murderers and that kind of thing. He and his producer, is that the word for it? His girlfriend or wife, I'm not sure which, and an assistant going on a road trip. I think they're going to some kind of con, but they're going to stop at a bunch of places along the way, do interviews and signings and travel I-90, I think, maybe? It could have been a little bit more clear, but they keep running into people who are connected to victims of the original killer. And yeah.
Some killings start happening along the way.
Killings start happening on the way. They start mirroring his book. So are we dealing with a resumption of the I-90 murderer who just mysteriously stopped? He was never caught. Is
Copycat
it a copycat, either copying the original killer or, doing it
else
because of the
happening.
book? Is he responsible for it?
That's an actually interesting question.
So yeah, there are definitely themes of one challenge of the creative process, because he's struggling to come up with the ending of the series, but also how do people interpret your work? How do people who interpret your work and act on it, are you responsible for that? Are all relevant themes to the story.
That's an interesting question. Certainly doesn't answer any of these questions, I don't think.
Not
within
necessarily.
It also kind of talks about
I don't think it's set out to answer the question, though.
Well, okay. You mentioned he's trying to figure out the end.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty poignant little discussion he has with Jordana Brewster, where he's trying to make this kind of more thoughtful, heady ending, but he needs
so that it's
to
not just this slashery kind of.
But
product.
he feels compelled.
We should say the comic is Slasher Man.
It's called Slasher Man, which is a horrible name. But
Gets the point across.
yeah, he feels compelled
don't
that he
wanna be
has
too
to
cute with it.
lower things down because he needs to satiate fandom.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, especially coming from Jay Baruchel, who's
been a creative his whole life.
He's been a creative his whole life. So he certainly has like these thoughts in his head probably when he's writing, directing, and stuff like that.
I like to think he plays the producer, or the independent comic label printer. I don't know what his role is, but I like to think his character in this movie is him returning to his role of Hard Right J, but after he's kind of got his shit back together and he's getting his shit together. And
does anyone know what he's talking about?
Everybody knows.
Hard Right J?
From the show that also has another major character in this movie, Letterkenny. You should know this by now. It's all Letterkenny references.
He's in Letterkenny?
All the way down. Yeah, he plays this Hard Right J character who shows up. He's an American who shows up in their town in Canada because they want to change the name of the local football team called the Indians.
Is he actually Canadian, though?
He is actually Canadian. Okay. He's playing an American on the Canadian TV show.
This is
coming to town.
Nolan.
We're here. You guys can't let them have something heritage. You got the upright right man.
All right. That sounds terrible. I will never check that out.
It's pretty funny.
It's
played for humor, of course.
I'm sure.
And the joke is at his expense.
We've had that discussion before a little bit. Not that particular, but about...
We're always talking about Jay Baruchel.
And this is one of the questions the movie poses, is the artist responsible for the interpretation of the work? I don't know.
There's no easy answer to that question in real life.
I mean, it's easy when something terrible happens and somebody says it's because of this, then you can say, well, yeah, this is what caused it.
I actually just had somebody 2 days ago tell me that if the news would just stop reporting on school shootings, then nobody would do it anymore. Like, okay, I don't buy that. Like, people have problems and they're looking to, I don't know. Maybe they wouldn't do that, but they'd do something.
Right. So...
Doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah, and the movie, like I said, doesn't answer that question in any way.
But this movie is also very much struggling with the idea of how do you end something. And like endings, you often do want answers, whether you get them or not. So, and I think it's interesting too for the medium of the comic book, because that's not what comic books do as a rule. And it's true for television shows, which might be more relatable to you idiots who just watch things on screens and don't actually read a goddamn book.
Learn to read. Pick up a damn book.
But comic books, television shows, they're built on the ongoing and always serialization, trying to pull you into the next episode, or just having a repeatable formula. So oftentimes, like, how many really good endings to a TV show are there?
Very few.
And even the ones where maybe listener, viewer, you're sitting there going, well, I love the ending to such and such a show. I guarantee you there's like a whole bunch of people who are happy to tell you you're wrong. They tend to be controversial, if nothing else, because like the first episode and the last episode are inherently nothing like everything in the middle. Like, how was Game of Thrones ever going to end in a way that like the broad fan base was going to be happy with?
The only
the title of the show is a hint at here's what the whole show is leading up to, and how can you be satisfied?
I mean, I think you can make a compelling story arc if you plan it out from the beginning. Yeah. And you have a single story. The problem is when you have to keep making a compelling story that keeps going and going.
Even if you have a plan,
just naturally doesn't feel like it's always building to the ending.
But even if you have an ending in mind when you start, like inherently that last episode is going to feel different than the rest of the show that people fall in love with.
Sure.
And the same way, like, I don't think most people like the pilot episodes of the TV shows. And part of that is just like TV shows trying to find their voice. But some of it too is you're doing an inherently a beginning. Yeah. Whereas most TV episodes are not beginning or ending, they're just all the middle. So, and I think that's true of comic books too, and that's part of the reason why this creator is struggling with that. So I thought it was a pretty authentic look into a creative person's life. I think it's one of the strengths of this movie is I think it's authentic in that regard.
Yeah, I will say we just did the thing that people bitch about all the time, is where we talked about something tangentially related to the movie more than we talked about the movie.
But we're getting into the good stuff.
But those moments in this movie for me were the best parts. Like he's having that talk.
I knew you'd like those. Yeah, you're creative.
Right. And like he's talking to the guy on the radio station who kind of flips the whole conversation on the head by saying, "Well, I knew somebody who died."
Gotcha questions.
Yeah, gotcha questions. But a lot of these interactions in this movie, to me, felt improvisational in some way. And I think some of it worked.
Because you scripted that line, and you struggled with it.
Some of them felt good, and some of them felt bad. There's a scene between Jordana Brewster and Jesse, what's his last name? Jesse Williams, where they are arguing and fighting, that I thought was portrayed pretty well.
I think that spoke to the thesis of the movie too, where they were like, because she was trying to write a book that was highlighting the victims of the I-90 killer rather than glorifying the killer, and he kind of felt like, what are you doing? He looked like that's what all my critics say, like.
Yeah.
And it felt like a pretty authentic argument.
Yeah, because he was taking her as like a personal attack against him when that's not what it was intended to be, and it was just like it was like the natural like cadence of a relationship.
But it wasn't like him discovering that she was doing this either. But like, he was also he had been specifically attacked that day, and it was just he was overwhelmed.
But
so it bubbled to a head.
You have the assistant character who almost ruined this entire movie. Just I couldn't. She just felt so out of place and so.
Yeah, she didn't take over too much of the movie though. I didn't think. So.
Whenever she was speaking, it just didn't feel natural to me. I don't know. But this is a weird movie, and I semi-enjoyed it, and I think ultimately, much like the character in the movie struggles with the ending, I feel like this movie kind of struggled with its ending.
I don't think I agree with you entirely. I would say I really like this movie. This is probably one of my favorite slasher movies I've seen in a long time. Some of the things I liked about it were the aesthetic. Like the lighting choices were really fun.
I like the green and red they played with, but I thought some of the lighting was like poor. So like they go.
It was fun though.
Well, they go into like a convenience store and it's like so dim, and they don't bother lighting people's faces or anything. It just felt like
kind of the point though.
You think so?
I think they were trying to really sell you on how dingy and gross this rural convenience store that had nothing but pickled products in it, and nobody's like, oh yeah, nobody's gonna eat anything out of here. This is gross as they're going for. So I think it fit the scene. I also love the music for this.
I love the music. Yeah.
It's not music I would sit down and listen to, but I thought it really fit really nicely.
Andrew Gordon McPherson and Wade McNeil.
Yeah.
Yeah, some really good retro stuff. One of the songs sounds almost exactly like Stranger Things with the doo-doo-doo-doo.
Okay, I didn't catch that.
But a lot of the songs were really cool.
And I like the way they incorporated the comic book panels and things into the movie. A lot of movies have done that now at this point, but I thought this one did it better than most. Not the best ever, but better than most. So overall, I really liked it. I thought it was a portrayal of the slasher from a creative perspective, not just from like a fan of slashers perspective.
Yes, 100%.
Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with a fan of slashers making slashers, and let's celebrate what slashers are. But like, there's a lot of that, and I'm just tired of it.
It tried to be elevated. It tried to be a little more, cerebral in some ways, I think. If this movie didn't have that element of him in this journey,
then there's no point in making the movie.
Well, then you would just have a slasher movie with random kills.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly acceptable. People dig that.
Yeah. Sometimes. I think this whole movie doesn't work without that element, though.
No, I wouldn't think it'd be nearly as good.
I think you started from the creative angle and then added in the slasher aspect of it. But yeah, this definitely felt like it was trying to be more like a 7 or something in that vein more so than a Terrifier.
Yeah. The ending, the whole movie felt like it was reaching for a really interesting twist, and we're into spoilers here.
There are some twists.
There are some twists, but ultimately, like, what comes to pass feels so, like, on the nose or just dumb to me that I was kind of disappointed. Although, I would have been even more disappointed if they would have been like, Jesse was the killer all along.
Yeah, that would have been really
like dumb. That would have been even more predictable.
I did like think about that at one point. Like, oh, they better not go that route. Or he was actually doing it. That would have been pretty dumb.
Well, there's that scene where he's like in this destroyed house or whatever, and I was like, oh, this is him trapped in his mind.
Yeah.
And he's like,
to me, that would have been a complete ripoff of like High Tension, where like, clearly that doesn't work at all this whole time.
Yeah.
And this movie felt even more grounded than High Tension did.
But it does have those aspects where you see the killer, but you don't really see him. You see like part of his face, and he's doing something like, okay, that is kind of like High Tension then.
Yeah. There were some twists, and the ending got big. You can't accuse it of not going big enough.
Something got big, I'll tell you that right now.
But I don't know. I wasn't looking for anything better than what I got. So I don't know. I was pleased with the ending. I mean, it's not like an ending for all time.
No.
Or anything like that. But I liked it.
Yeah, it's a little different, which is always something to be commended.
Yeah.
And it's on Shudder, and it doesn't waste your time. It's pretty.
This movie literally does say, quote, "Fuck your ending." It knows. This movie knows.
Wow, Jay Baruchel, so edgy. So edgy, Jay.
So edgy.
Yeah, check it out. It's called something about
Random
Acts of
Violence.
Random Acts of Violence, out now on Shudder. Not on Canadian Shudder, though. How dare you, sir? If you're in Canada,
Well,
Enjoy that healthcare and maple syrup, but us down here, we're going to suck down that violence.
Jay Baruchel got that sweet, sweet Canadian distribution money for being a homegrown Canadian. I think this was partially funded by like the Toronto Film Office or something like that. So
it did take like, he started writing this or something.
Put it on their socialized channel or whatever.
They said they started writing this in like 2011.
Yeah.
And didn't get secure funding till like 2016 or 15 or something like that. So it's been in production for quite a while.
But you know how it is. Sometimes you set a project aside either because you get busy with something else or you can't make it happen now, but you get an opportunity.
Well, not really, but Jay Baruchel does because he's highly successful.
Well, yeah. He's successful enough he can get things done as long as he keeps his budgets within a reasonable amount.
Yeah, check it out. Random Acts of Violence. That's it. Thanks for watching Bad Movie Night. We'll catch you here next time.
And thank you very much to the Zord for allowing us to put out this video.